Okay, hello boys, hello girls. Welcome to your review video for your geography exam. This is the first part of the first trimester about geographic skills. So what are these geographic skills about? The topics that we have been seeing. Well, first, these are the four elements that we are going to, or the five topics that we are going to be having in our exam. First, the five elements of geography. 2, models and projections as one same topic. 3, elements of a map. And 4, scaling. So let's start with the 5 elements. You should know these 5 elements by heart by now. So first element, place. The first element of geography is very related to the place of geography within science. Geography is mostly a social science. So this first very small thing that geography studies is anywhere with a social or personal meaning, because if we are taking interest, if we are going to care about studying a certain location, that is because it has some sort of social or personal meaning. That is why place has this type of definition. We wouldn't care about studying any location at all if it didn't have a social or personal meaning. So always, in order to remember what is a place, you may think about no place as an opposition. So remember that no places are just transition places, transition locations, where you establish no permanent social interactions. So you may think about the subway, you may think about a train station, about an airport, about a plane, an airplane on itself, perhaps a highway, yes. All these places are just transition places, like you establish no interaction in those places. However, there are some people that actually work in the highway, that actually work in the train station, that actually work in the subway, and all those people would consider these places as places, not as no places. So always remember the criterion in order to define if a place is actually a place or a no place is if it has some sort of social or personal meaning. So a certain location may be a place for some people and a no place for other people. Also, something really important is that a place doesn't have a sole location. Places can change location and still be the same places. I always give you the example about people that live in their cars or people that have this type of caravan houses, right? The place, their house, may be moving around, maybe changing location. So it is very important to know that places and also no places are not definitely linked to a certain location. They can change location. So there we should go to our second element. In here we are missing the title, but it is location, precisely, where a place is found. And we have two types of location. Relative location, that is the location in which you use other places as a reference in order to find the place that you want to find. For example, Maddox Academy is a few meters away from Hospital San Jose, a few meters away from Santa Teresita's church, like 2 kilometers away from Plaza Satélite, right? So all these places, you can use them as a reference in order to find Maddox Academy. So that would be a relative location. Also, you can say Cuernavaca is 2 hours south of Mexico City, or Querétaro is 2 hours north of Mexico City. And all those are relative locations because you are using other places as reference. However, in absolute location, what you need to give is coordinates, latitude and longitude coordinates. Always remember, absolute location is what your friend Lalo can give you, the latitude and the longitude, and always in this same order. You will always say first the latitude and then the longitude. So these are also references, but they are reference to pretty established points. So that are the parallels, and those are the parallels and the meridians. In the case of the latitude, you are referencing the parallel known as the equator. So that is the 0 degree latitude. And when you are talking about longitude, you are referencing Greenwich meridian. So that is the 0 degree longitude, that's Greenwich. So those would be our two types of locations. The third element of geography is region. Remember that regions are places, so that's in plural, more than one place, that can be joined together by common criteria. So they share certain things, and by sharing those things, you can join them together, you can group them in order to form a region. I would always advise you to think about the most common types of regions. In that way, you can infer what is a region. For example, economical regions. In economical regions, you are going to have several places, perhaps several countries, that are sharing perhaps the resources that they are exploiting, or that they are sharing the type of economic activity. Perhaps it is a primary activity, which is precisely getting materials out of nature. Perhaps it is secondary economic activity that is concerned with the transformation of those prime materials into products, or perhaps it is the tertiary economic activity that is goods and services, right? Mainly the production of services or the offer of services. So that can talk about an economic region. They are sharing these criteria. Also, you can talk about cultural regions, where you can say that all these places share perhaps a language, perhaps they are sharing some customs, perhaps they are sharing some beliefs, some social practices, some food that they eat, and that they eat it in a certain way. So all that can also speak about a cultural region. Climate regions are also very typical regions within geography. Those are defined by climate, so the weather throughout the year, about the precipitation throughout the year, and also the temperature and the change within season, how weather and climate is changing throughout the seasons of the year. And these criteria may allow us to define climate region. So that is also a very common type of region that we use in geography. So always think about those regions when you want to define a region, because you can get the clue there and you can infer what a region is. A group of places that share common criteria, okay, that share common characteristics. So fourth, movement, a change of location. Remember that we have studied at least two types of human movement. That is, three types of human movement, because you in classes have always given me this example. Migration, people that travel to other countries in order to live there, perhaps because either they have better chances of living, or because they got a better job in there, they have job opportunities in other countries, so that is migration. Or perhaps because of violence. Many people, for example, in Central America are living in really violent situations, so they have to migrate towards Mexico and the United States in order to escape those situations. So that is a type of migration. But we have also studied human movement known as nomadism, in which the societies change location throughout the year out of tradition, and also transhumans, in which societies change location throughout the year in order to find resources. So it is out of survival, right? They are usually shepherd societies, so they have cows, they have sheep, they have goats, and in order to feed them, they need to be moving around throughout the year. So those are at least three types of human movement that we have seen. But we also have non-human animal migrations, right? Like when winter is coming in the northern hemisphere, many species are going to travel south in order to escape the cold weather. For example, the monarch butterflies, right? They live in Canada, and when winter is coming, they escape the freezing cold and they come to Mexico, to the forests in Michoacan. So whenever you go there, you think it is really cold, but it is not cold at all as it is in Canada. It has nothing to do with the cold in Canada. So they are escaping from that very, very bad cold, and they come here where it is a bit warmer. So those are types of migration too, of movements. They are animal movement, and they are also relevant for geography. Finally, we have some very broad movements in a very broad scale that concern the planet. For example, continental drift, so how the continents are moving around in the in the asthenosphere, that is a layer of the Earth that we will study starting the second half of this trimester. And we also have, of course, rotation, that is how Earth is spinning around its own axis. And finally, it is called, I always forget this one because it is not translation. You should take this into consideration. In English, we don't say translation because that means to translate something to another language, right? No, in English, we say revolution. Revolution is the movement in which the Earth moves around the sun, right? So basically, we can think about these three planetary movements, or at least at a planetary scale, because we also have continental drift, and they are very interesting topics for geography. So finally, human-environment interaction. As I always tell you, human-environment interaction is very important for geography, but what is more relevant is that you need to understand that this is a bidirectional interaction. So both the environment will be affecting humans, and humans will be affecting the environment. In here it says interaction, but it should say environment too. Let me correct it right now. So in human-environment interaction, we will see how societies modify the environment in order to get their living, but we will also see how the environment will affect the behavior of societies. For example, think about Nuer people. Nuer people are going to have to move around throughout the year in order to get their living, in order to be able to feed their cattle. So the environment is affecting the humans, but also many human societies affect the environment. So that bidirectional relation is what we know as human-environment interaction, yes? So these are the 5 elements of geography. Remember that you need to know the definitions, but you also need to be able to apply them, because what you will have in your exam is a case of study, and you will have to identify these elements in your exam, and in this case of study. So this was location, and this is environment, right? So I only want to make some precisions over here, and it is about absolute location. Remember that absolute location is related to the parallels and the meridians. The parallels are these rings. They are rings that are going to be dividing the Earth from north to south, and they are going to have its 0 degree in the equator. Remember, the 0 degree latitude is the equator, and we have the meridians that are going to be these lines. In this case, they are lines that are dividing the world basically from east to west, right? They are going up and down, so they leave sections east to west. So perhaps this is more understandable, but always remember, because you will have to apply this in your exam, everything that is above the equator will have a positive latitude. Remember that the latitude is always the first number that you get. So if you pay attention here in the northern hemisphere, the two, in both cases, both in America and in Asia and Europe, what you're going to see are positive signs in the latitude. And in here, in the southern hemisphere, what you are going to see are negative signs in the latitude. And then we have the longitude that is going to be talking about Greenwich. So everything to the right of Greenwich is going to have a positive a positive longitude, and everything to the left of Greenwich is going to have a negative longitude. So over here you can see the combinations, right? This part of North America, basically North and Central America, are going to have a positive sign in the latitude and a negative sign in the longitude. If we move over here to Asia, Africa, Europe, most of Africa at least, what we are going to have is a positive latitude because they are above the equator, and also a positive longitude because they are to the right of Greenwich. Then if we go here to South America, basically South America, they have both a negative latitude because they are below the equatorial line, and also a negative longitude because they are to the left of Greenwich. In here, finally, if we see the south of Africa, a part of Southeast Asia, and basically Australia, what we are going to see is a negative latitude because they are below the equator, and a positive longitude because they are to the right of Greenwich. So always remember this because you will have to apply this in your exam. Next topic. So that was our first topic, right? 5 elements of geography. The second topic is models or projections, or them both in the same topic. So remember that models are representations of objects, phenomena, processes. You can make a model out of almost anything, or actually out of anything. And what they do is that we use them in order to study these objects, phenomena, whatever. They allow us to understand reality better. But why can we understand reality better if we use a model? Well, because we choose the characteristics that we want to represent and we leave other characteristics behind. Think about the experiment that you did with your ants. You were able to see in the model, you were able to see the pheromone, you were able to control the amount of ants, you were able to control the evaporation rate of the pheromone, and in reality you actually couldn't modify those variables, and you actually had a lot of issues because perhaps very few ants would come to your sugar, and in the model you can modify the amount of ants that you are going to be having. So models make things a lot easier, and usually in scientific studies what we do is that when we don't have a model, we need to go to reality, we study reality, and with those observations we make a model in order to make it better for next time. And also sometimes we cannot experiment in reality a lot of things, so we need to create models in order to make experiments such as the ones that you did in your simulation. Those are simulations, experiments that you can run based on models. So models make things visually understandable, but it is not going to be never you're going to have the same thing in a model than in reality. Why? Because you are just choosing some variables. So models are going to be great for the variables that you are choosing, but they are going to be really bad for the variables that you are not including. Just always remember, models are always wrong. Why? Because they will never have all the variables, but they are useful because they allow us to understand the variables that we are actually including. So we have basically 3 ways of producing models in objects. This is in objects because if we want to model processes, if we want to model phenomena, then we have other ways to do that. For example, dynamics, time series analysis, whatever. But when we want to model an object, we basically have 3 ways: projections, sections, and surface reconstruction. In geography, we're going to use all those methods. For example, projections. This is the one that is going to come in your exam. That is why it is models projections in the title. This is the one that is coming in your exam. In projections, what you do is that you literally project the Earth into a plane. For example, in this case, a plane that is found in the northern hemisphere, in the North Pole, and you have the azimuthal projection. Over here in the conical projection, you are going to project the Earth into a cone, and you have the conic projection. And finally, in the cylindrical projection, you are going to be projecting the Earth into a cylinder, so you can have this nice flat representation. So the main problem here, of course, is that projections will always have the weak point that they depend heavily on the perspective that you are taking. If you modify the perspective, then you are going to get a different result. So this may change a lot the characteristics of reality that you are able to observe in your projection. But we're also going to see sections. For example, in here you have a nice section of the Earth. And in sections, you can see better the layers of something. And then you can reconstruct those layers and you're going to have the object. So next trimester, we're going to start with physical geography and we're going to start the layers of the Earth. And this is a nice section of the Earth, so you can see the layers inside. And finally, surface reconstruction. And we have already studied this one, right? It is the GOSI geoid that was made by the European, the European Institution of Space Studies. So what they did was reconstruct all the points that they were able to get of the surface of the Earth. They chose some characteristics, and through that they were able to make this model where they show you the behavior of gravity on Earth. So these are basically the three types of model reconstruction, but what I need you to pay a lot of attention to is to the limitations that you are going to have mainly in the cylindrical projection and mainly in the Mercator projection, in the Mercator maps. This is what I am going to ask you in your exam, but you won't be able to solve it if you don't understand first that all of these are models of the Earth. So they are going to have some limitations, and those limitations are going to be given by the characteristics that you choose and the characteristics that you leave behind. So that is what is going to be coming in your exam. So topic number 3, elements of a map. Here you have a very nice map. Actually, I used this map in one of the presentations that I gave you, and I only have to include this element of a map, the compass rose. It was the only one missing. But remember, first element of a map, a title. In a title, you are going to say what the map is talking about. So it says linguistic map of the Southern Sudan based on 1955 and 1956 census, okay? So the information that you are going to find in this map is the linguistic regions, let's say, of Southern Sudan. Then you are going to have symbols. In here, the symbols are going to be the type of lines that you're going to have, or perhaps the dots. And those symbols are explained in the key. This is the key. For example, everything that has these slashes as a lines, that these these tilt lines with a slope is going to be the Nilotic region. All these lines that you're going to have here that are like interrupted lines are going to be the Nilo-Amitic region or languages. And in the dots, you're going to have the Sudanic languages. So this is the key. The key is going to explain the symbols. In this case, the symbols is the type of, let's say, feeling that these regions have. Also, in here, you have the scale bar. So if you would measure this scale, perhaps this scale is 5 centimeters long. And you know that 5 centimeters in this map is going to be 300 miles in reality. So the scale would be 5 centimeters to 300 miles, and you can already solve this type of problems. So, basically, and finally, of course, the compass rose, in which you are going to be saying where is north, where is south, where is east and west, and you can include, and you should in your exam, this complementary information that is going to be the latitude and longitude lines. These are the longitude and this is the latitude, okay? So again, if we would want to find the heart of Nordland, this would be more or less in the 9 degrees latitude and 30 degrees longitude, right? More or less around here, in the middle of here, 9, and let me draw it. Let's see, 9. Oops, sorry. I'm going to make it smaller to be able to do it. 9 degrees latitude and 30 degrees longitude. So we would find it here. Yes. Next topic, these were the elements of a map. Next topic, scaling. This is the last topic. In here, I just want you to remember that you should always be able to use this formula. N equals S to the D. D is the dimension, N is the number of copies, and N is the scale. When you're working in the first dimension, perhaps you can forget about the D because it is just 1. So imagine in this line, the red line is growing 2 times. It is becoming twice as big in order to become the green line, right? So it is only growing in 1 dimension. That is the purple arrow. It only grows in 1 dimension. So if we say that I require 2 copies in order to make 2 copies of the red line in order to fill the green line, then the number of copies is 2 and the scaling factor is also 2. But when I am in the second dimension, then I am not only going to be growing in one direction, but in two directions. So in this case, it is important to remember the D. We are in the second dimension, so how many copies of this red square do I require in order to fill this green square? And those are obviously 4, right? So 4 equals S to the second dimension. So what would be S? Well, always remember, if I'm going to write it here, if we said that the number of copies was 2, the dimension is 2, the number of copies was 4, right? It is 4, not 2. The number of copies is 4, the dimension is 2. So what is the square root of 4? Well, then the scale is 2, yes? That is a nice way of solving these problems. Just remember that the d root of n is going to be able to give you the s. And finally, in the third dimension, you are not just growing in one direction, in two directions, but you're growing in 3 directions. So if you pay attention to this cube that you have over here, I am going to draw it again. You can see that it is at least half of one direction, of 2 directions. Okay, that was really ugly, right? Let me do it again. Okay. This way, this way, this way, and this way. So, what is the number of copies that I am going to get? Well, first, let's fill the information. We're in the third dimension, right? In here, we can already write 3. The number of copies is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, right? Because let me do it again so you can count it with me. Let's imagine we have this first cube, right? And then you scale it to one direction, so you get this second cube. But you need to scale it then back because you are in another direction. And finally, when you scale it in the third direction, you are going to have twice this bed. So you're going to multiply this bed and you're going to get, let me try to make it smaller. You're going to get 8 copies. The result is going to be 8 copies. I am not the best drawer, but you can see it better here. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next to this one is 6, 7, and 8, right? So the number of copies is going to be 8 copies. And, number of copies equals to 8. So which number raised to the third power can give you 8? So s equals the cubic root of 3, so that is 2. But usually you may always remember that what you can do, like this is just a demonstration, but what you will usually get, and remember you need to ask yourself, am I going to scale up or am I going to scale down? If I am going to scale up, then I need to divide the big number between the small number, and that will give me the number of copies. But if I am going to scale down, then I should divide the small number between the big number, and that will be the number of copies, like the exercise that we did about Mercury and the size of the Earth. So this was just like a demonstration, this one over here, about a third dimensional object, but the procedure that you should follow in your exam is this one. Remember, you should always solve first the letter D, because that is going to give you already one piece of the information. Then, in order to get n, this is what you're going to do. If you are scaling up, this is if you are making something small bigger, you need to divide the big number between the small number. And if you want to make something big smaller, this is scaling down, then you divide the small number between the big number. And that gives you the number of copies. So all you have to do is take that number of copies and take the d root. So perhaps this is the squared root or the cubic root. It depends if you're working in the second or third dimension, and that will give you the scale. So those are all the topics, boys and girls. I hope that this was useful for you to study, and well, have a nice weekend. I will also upload the history video in a few moments.